All right, guys, welcome back to Downtown Rams. As always, I'm Alexis Kraft, joined here with my co host, Jake Ellenbogen, and we are coming to you to preview our matchup against the New Orleans Saints this Sunday in New Orleans. Uh, it's going to be, an interesting game. Obviously, we're coming off that Sunday night football loss to Philadelphia. Now we're going to play against the Saints, and the Saints are a very different team than Philadelphia. And Jake, I don't think it's um I think it's fair to say this is a must-win game for the Rams. I know that the NFC West is very close right now. It's kind of hard maybe to theoretically say that any game is a must-win game, but the Rams are kind of in a position right now, in my opinion, where they really cannot afford to lose this game because if other teams, the NFC West, start winning, then you got to play catch up. And this is a game that we should win. And we are going to break down why. But Jake and I were literally talking before we started recording, and we realized that there are literally only three active wide receivers on the Saints roster right now. That's how banged up they were. I thought it was a fluke. I was scrolling through multiple depth charts from like different sources. I was like, this can't be right. They can't only have three wide receivers, but they do. They only have three wide receivers. We can say they have four if we're going to count Taysom Hill as a wide receiver. He's, obviously like kind of that flex receiver, tight end, quarterback, whatever you want to call him. But if you want to count him as a receiver, then there's four. But theoretically, they only have three active wide receivers. Jake, what's your opinion, going into this game against the Saints? What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at how banged up they are at receiver, that definitely hurts. I think when you look at just the way Derek Carr has played this year, that's been their equalizer. Derek Carr's given him a chance in just about every game that he has been healthy in, and so I think that's really kind of how they see it as well. As long as you have a Derek Carr, you have a chance. I mean, they just blew out the Browns, 2 weeks ago against Jameis Winston, and Derek Carr had to throw. And in that game, he went 21 of 27 for 248 yards and two touchdowns and didn't throw an interception. All the while only throwing to, as you said, just these guys, right? Kevin Austin Jr. was one of them that he threw to in that game. Then you have your tight ends, Juwan Johnson and, Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau. So, I mean, you're talking about the four, heaviest targeted receivers in the game, and three of those four were tight ends. So yeah, I think Derek Carr is just gonna keep playing like Derek Carr plays, and I think regardless of the fact that Olave's out and all of that, he's an NFL quarterback, and he's an NFL quarterback in this league that doesn't really get enough respect, and you can never just assume anything. And we've seen Matthew Stafford throw into guys like Jordan Whittington, who maybe people outside of the Rams had no idea who that was, and, throw into Xavier Smith and Brandon Powell over the years. And I think it's just when good quarterbacks are in, I mean, you have to expect that they're going to be able to perform at some sort of decent level, regardless of who they're throwing to. So it's definitely interesting, and it, advantage Rams for sure, but definitely don't sleep on Derek Carr, who is back. He is healthy. And because of that, the Saints, they've won, two straight. They barely lost to the Panthers. I'm sure that's a game that they would want back. But the last two games against the Falcons and Browns, say what you will about the Browns, that's been a really big quarterback issue there. But they still have a defense. And, Carr was able to help put up 35 points. And then the Falcons game, it was a huge win by the Saints to keep them kind of in this whole thing. And, more importantly, keep the Falcons from running away with this division. So I think really what the Rams need to understand is they're looking at a team that's as desperate as they are, if not more desperate, and a team that kind of feels like, yeah, if they were to win out, and that sounds kind of crazy, but if they were to win out, just like say the Rams, both teams can finish 10-7, and the Rams would finish 11-6 if they won out, but the Saints have to feel good with that win over the Falcons. They have to feel like they have a shot, but it really, it starts with this game coming off the bye. Can you beat the Rams, who are also desperate? That's an interesting thing because, desperation teams, those teams are going to give you their all, and the Saints are at home. So, we'll see what ends up happening.
So let's start by talking about that Saints offense. Because as we just talked about, obviously, you know, banged up. Derek Carr is back. They have Alvin Kamara, right, who's one of the better running backs in the league. I've always been really curious about their usage of Kamara, especially this season. If anybody has him in fantasy, you know how frustrating it's been to have him in fantasy this season because keeps getting sniped at the goal line by Taysom Hill. So, I've been saying I feel like Alvin is due for a big game, and I'm wondering if maybe the Saints are viewing, the Rams as an opportunity to let him do that because he's a great player. He's a great receiving back too. I'm a really big fan of him, and I think definitely with all the injuries, he is their biggest weapon right now. I mean, Taysom Hill, obviously, big weapon, right? Like ultimate flex player. There really isn't anybody in the NFL like him. But Alvin Kamara is a fantastic player, and I'm wondering if this is going to be an opportunity for him to put a lot of yards in the ground, to get some of those touchdowns back that he keeps getting robbed of. If anybody's been sports betting on touchdowns for him, as I have, you know that for the past few weeks, the Saints have not utilized him uh, in terms of getting into the end zone. But a really interesting addition to this Saints offense, Jake, is MVS, Valdez Scantling. He had like a really big game. I don't know if it was the game before last week or the one before that. I'm have all my stats up. I don't see it here, but he had like two touchdowns. It was the first game that they signed him, right, as a free agent. And all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh my God, he just had like the most amazing game." Now, I think that also you can attribute to Derek Carr, like you said. Derek Carr is a good way of finding whoever's there on the offense. If you're playing, he's going to find you. But he's someone to look out for as well. But Jake, what do you think this strategy for the Saints is going to be going against our defense? Do you think that they're going to try and get something going in the run game? As I alluded to earlier, do you think they're going to try, targeting our secondary? I mean, you have Derek Carr. You certainly can make a case for him to do that. But what do you think they're going to do? Because the Saints are a little bit of a wild card already, but now that they have all these injuries and, they're down a ton of receivers, I wonder if that's going to affect how they go against the Rams defense.
Yeah, well, it's definitely interesting because it's not a straightforward team. I mean, you do have Taysom Hill, who's kind of that wild card, and there'll be some games they barely use him, and there'll be some games where they use him a lot. And when you look at Alvin Kamara, I mean, this is somebody who pretty much is the engine to their offense, right? And the last two games, he had 16 carries and 17 carries. Then he had 29 against Carolina in a game they lost. They had 10 against the Chargers, 7 against the Broncos, 13 against Tampa, 11 against Kansas City. He just doesn't really get a consistent, workload in the, yards, carrying as far as I'm concerned. This is a guy that has been targeted 11 times, season high in a game this year, though. So you always have to be aware of where, Alvin Kamara, number 41, is at all times. With that said, I think a lot of people are going to look at this the wrong way. The Rams are coming off a game in which they allowed a lot of yards, over 250 to Saquon Barkley. Barkley is a completely different running back than Alvin Kamara. Kamara does not have the speed that Barkley has. He does not have that breakaway speed, and so I think people are going to be very quick to react, especially because it was on prime time, as if the Rams can't stop the run. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of bets placed on Alvin Kamara. Of course, our sponsor, Prize Picks. There's going to be a lot of people playing Alvin Kamara this week and just putting over on whatever he has. But I'm going to be honest with you. I feel as though when I watch this Rams defense since the bye week, they've done a really nice job against the run. I think that game against Saquon Barkley was going up against somebody who's different than anybody you're going to face all year. Does not even look like they're going to get a Christian McCaffrey who's healthy. So when you factor in that, Alvin Kamara, his longest run this year is 24 yards. That's not necessarily what Barkley is going to, what he did, versus the Rams. That's not necessarily something I'm expecting Kamara to do. It's not to say that he can't have an explosive play, but when people act like he's going to just run for 200 now, and the Rams defense, the floodgates have opened, I just have to push back on that. I think that they're going to go with a balanced game plan, Alexis. I really do. I think that they're going to try and establish the run early on with Kamara. If they can't do it, they have some other weapons to get involved, including Kamara. This is a guy that has 55 receptions this year. So they are going to get him involved in the receiving game. I think you're going to see a lot of Taysom Hill. And I think they're going to take quite a few shots down the field to, a Marquez Valdez Scantling. And I think it makes sense because you have to, if you can, and the Rams have dominated with the pressure this year up front, but if you can give Derek Carr some time, you absolutely have to test out this secondary that's been, kind of up and down at times. I think you've seen some really good things. Think you've seen some kind of disappointing things, especially, Darius Williams as of late has really struggled. So I think that they're going to be trying different things. And I think really the goal for the Saints, if you were to ask anybody in the Saints organization and say they were allowed to tell you how an ideal Saints win would look, it would be ball control. It would be, just killing the clock, time of possession battle, running the ball with Kamara, running the ball with Taysom Hill, and then having Derek Carr be, himself as he's been all year, 106 passer rating in the red zone. So that's what I think is likely their plan. They're really trying to keep this balance, knowing that if they can open up the deep part of the field, they have a guy in Marquez Valdez Scantling. It's never been an issue about his speed or if he can actually win over the top. His issue's always been actually catching the football. So when he's doing that, he's very dangerous, and the Rams are going to have to look out for him, especially, when you have that guy that can beat you over the top that's faster than just about anybody else on your team.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you in terms of I think that the Saints are going to try a balanced approach to this defense. Yes, I know that they have all these injuries, in the receiving room. I know that that probably changes their game plan a little bit, but I do think that, they're not going to just try to run the ball on the ground with Alvin. They're just not. You've got Taysom Hill who you can get involved. MVS is still, he's been playing well for them. And you've got Derek Carr, who, kind of like you mentioned earlier, he does a good job of getting the ball to whoever is on the field. So, yes, I think they're going to try a balanced approach, and we'll see. We'll see if some of these newer receivers that they have, are able to step up and able to have success against the Rams secondary. If not, then maybe they do try to just, run the ball on the ground, as much as they can. So we'll see. I think that the Saints are kind of one of those teams that, I've watched games where they look pretty good and in sync, and I watch games where it's just kind of like brutal and it's painful. But usually those games for them, both teams they've just been weird. The Saints have just been a little, confusing, I think, for people this season. But you've got Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr to the Saints is kind of what Matthew Stafford is to the Rams in a way. They're both pretty good at making something from nothing when you've got injuries around you. So, yeah, I don't know. I think a little bit unpredictable, but yeah, I mean, I think we'll see. I think Taysom Hill to me is the guy that really kind of scares me because there's nobody really like him in the NFL. I think it's hard to sometimes prepare for how they're going to use Taysom Hill, and I could see, this kind of younger Rams defense being thrown off a little bit by him. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints try to get him involved early and often. But Jake, wrapping up kind of on their offense against our defense, talking about our defense and what we need to do and how they played, against the Eagles, because we didn't get to record really a recap episode, excuse me, because you were at the game and you've been traveling. And so we haven't been able to record. But, kind of talking about, this defense and what happened against Saquon Barkley. I think you bring up a good point that Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara are not the same running back. My opinion, and I said this when we did the preview episode for the Eagles game, is that Saquon Barkley is the MVP of the league. I think he legitimately has a conversation for that. He's phenomenal, arguably the best running back in the game right now. So, yes, while it was very frustrating and he put up embarrassing numbers against the Rams defense, obviously, I don't think that that's typical. And I don't think that that is going to be something that we're going to be facing against New Orleans. But Jake, do you kind of share in that sentiment a little bit? Is there anything particularly that you think our defense needs to do against the Saints that they didn't do against Philadelphia?
They just need to play their style of game. I think they got away from that a little bit. I do think that the defense had a surprisingly decent game, all things considered. They held the Eagles 2 of 5 in the red zone, almost 1 of 5. With the AJ Brown touchdown. But yeah, I thought they did a nice job at points, and they just gave up, those explosive plays. I mean, you start off the second half, and everything is okay. We had our chance to kind of go over some things, and we don't love exactly where we are. Well, let's get a quick stop, and that doesn't happen. Barkley, totes it for 70 yards right off the rip, and at that point, it's very much a momentum based game. There's a lot of snowball, effect going on. And I think, going into this one, I just don't see anybody being like a Saquon Barkley to actually do that. They've been in every game except for, well, I would say they were in the game that last week, as bad as it looked at points. For the majority of the game, I think they were in it. The Cardinals game, they were not in week 2, but that is an absolute fluke. That would never happen again. I just don't really see this team as like, when they're not in a game, it is rare. This is a team that fights hard, and they are well coached, and there's been some unfortunate things that have happened this year, but make no mistake about it, they're going to be ready for the Saints. They know that they have the best pass rush in the league. They know that they have a good secondary. They have a lot going for them on the defensive side. I don't think you can just have that Eagles game wipe away what they were doing as a top 3 defense analytically, coming off the bye. I just think that, looking at this game, the Saints don't have that type of firepower that the Eagles do. You have an AJ Brown, you have a Saquon Barkley. In this case, it would be Chris Olave, but he's out. Then you have Alvin Kamara, who again can be that lightning in a bottle, but at the same time, he's not Barkley. Okay, it's not anybody you've never seen before. But you also don't want to discredit what he can do, because he's had some huge games in the past as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, I alluded to earlier that, I think the past, month maybe for him has been slower than people who have him in fantasy or people who bet on him want to see. But that could change at any time. He certainly could come out, against the Rams, and the Saints could use him a little bit more, and he could have a huge game. He's very talented. So yeah, kind of like we've said, that this offense is not the Eagles offense. I think that they're going to be obviously competent. I think they're going to put up, you know, a good game, maybe, hopefully not a good game, but they're not going to be, we're not going against a bad offense by any means. I think they're working with what they have, is probably a good way to phrase it with all the injuries. And we definitely can't discredit them, but I do think that our defense should be able to effectively slow them down, if they play their game. Keyword there, if they play their game and they step up to the plate. Jake, looking now to our offense and what we need to do against the Saints. The offense struggled against Philadelphia more than we, I think, thought they would. The biggest red flag was the offensive line. I mean, the offensive line against Philadelphia, or sorry, against Philadelphia, was really bad. They didn't look the same. It was a little confusing. Obviously, we have some injuries, which obviously story of the year for the Rams, injuries in the offensive line. It's taken forever to get continuity. It's taken forever to build chemistry. We thought we'd corrected the problem. Obviously, we didn't. So now looking at this game against the Saints, Jake, I think the critical piece to this Rams offense is getting the offensive line to just be competent, like play decent, protect Stafford. What we saw against Philadelphia is like it totally destroyed the run and the pass game because we couldn't get anything going. It looked pretty bad. The play calling I didn't think was amazing against the Eagles. I didn't think it was bad though. I don't think we can look at the play calling and what happened on Sunday and say that's why the Rams lost. I mean, there were some plays that I thought, were bad decisions in terms of play calling. but, I think that there wasn't much to work with offensively. So I guess what are your thoughts against the Saints? My inclination is to try running the ball on the ground, but I also think that we can have some success in the pass game. I think a balanced approach against the Saints sounds good. Sorry, I'm having a connection problem, so I can't see anything. But Jake, while I'm figuring out what's haunting my computer, what do you think this Rams offense needs to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the Saints defense 2 weeks ago, because they were off on a bye, but against the Browns, they got a lot of pressure. And I think, that's an important thing up front. The Rams offensive line, like you mentioned, they're going to have to protect Stafford. It was that the Eagles, was that what they are? We'll see. But I do think that, when you look at what the Saints can bring, you talk about a guy like Carl Granderson up front, right? He had 7 pressures last week. In addition to that, you have Brian Breesy. That's another guy that's really good. And, Colin Saunders, friend of the show, and, Cam Jordan and Chase Young and all these guys, right? Well, you have to be able to, protect those guys up front. If you give Stafford time, I mean, even when you don't give Stafford time, he's very, very good. But even when you get Stafford time, you can make things happen. And I think there's a really big opportunity here because when you go back and you look at that Saints, that team and how they defended, the Browns, despite the fact that it was a complete blowout and it didn't look relatively close, Alante Taylor was picked on. He gave up 145 yards on 10 targets. In addition to that, Ugo Amadi, who is kind of their guy in the slot, he gave up 11 of his 12 targets for 96 yards. So I see opportunities here. I see opportunities through the slot, whether that's Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, whoever, can really attack Ugo Amadi. And then I think you have a guy on the boundary that can attack Alante Taylor, whether that is those two or DeMarcus Robinson or Tutu Atwell. I think that this is an opportunity here that the Saints let you throw on them. The Saints let you run on them. I think the Rams, I feel like we've said it many times before, but this could be a quote unquote get right game where, all of a sudden you get your offense back on track. This is a defense that kind of just let, in my opinion, just let Jameis Winston really do whatever he wanted to do. You go back to that game and he had 395 yards and 2 touchdowns, didn't throw an interception. That was evident. He had a lot of what he wanted to do, a lot of what they wanted to work with worked out. And I feel like this Saints defense is not quite on the level of, what it's been in the past. So I think it's an opportunity for the Rams, establish the run, open up the play action attack and, try and really test them downfield. I think this is definitely a game that I think the Rams would be equipped to win multiple ways. Big reason for this: Derek Carr isn't going to be the mobile quarterback that Jalen Hurts was. A lot of people didn't really understand that the Rams actually generated plenty of pressure on Jalen Hurts. He just made short work of it because he would just run for the first down. Derek Carr's not going to do that as much. So I think you have that opportunity where he's not super mobile. Defense should be able to hang tough there. And then on the other side of it, I think this offense is talented enough to get into a barn burner, kind of like a shootout type of scenario. And I think that the defense of the Saints, at least in the secondary, is, I guess, open to really being thrown on. And I think that kind of puts the Rams in a position where if it does get into that type of game, I think they can win that game. And if it gets into a defensive minded game, I think they'll win that game as well. I just think that there are multiple outs here as opposed to going up against the Philadelphia Eagles and having to worry about a guy that could hit a 70-yard home run or, having a quarterback that can turn any 3rd and long into a first down. Not having those two things to go up against, I think gives them a really good shot. And let's not act like the Rams haven't been in just about every game this year. I think the Saints, as desperate as they are, the Rams, as desperate as they are, it's going to be a fun game. But the Rams have no reason why they can't win this game.
Yeah, I was looking at this depth chart for the Saints defense. And, you mentioned Colin Saunders, who we interviewed when he was getting drafted, and he was a really fun interview. And that was
Yeah.
also right after he did that viral, he did the backflip. Was it at the Senior Bowl that he did that?
Yep, I was
Like,
there.
yeah, this massive, like, almost 300-pound guy was doing like a backflip, and it like was insane. And then like a couple of days later, he was on our show. But there's another guy on their defense who I believe we interviewed, which Jake, correct me if I'm wrong. Will Harris, safety out of Boston College.
Yes.
We interviewed him. He played with Detroit. I thought he was a very underrated player for Detroit. I think he's solid, somebody to look out for. But yeah, I was thinking that we interviewed him, but there was that one year we interviewed so many people out of Boston College that I was like, was he
Oh,
like um, part of that? But yeah, you mentioned Alontae Taylor. He got picked on. They've got Kool-Aid McKinstry, rookie, second round pick, playing corner for them. Demario Davis, Pete. There's guys on this team, particularly this defense, that I think are pretty underrated. You're right. Another guy we interviewed, DeMarco Jackson, playing on their defense. So, yeah, I don't think that, this is a defense that we can, look at and say, oh, yeah, we should be able to, score easily against them. But I think when the Rams play their game, they should have success against New Orleans. I'm assuming it's going to be a balanced approach. I don't know, Jake. I think we should touch on the running back situation for the Rams a little bit, because if we didn't, everybody would tell me I'm avoiding the conversation. But going, you and I laugh. But going into this game, Jake, look at Kyron Williams. He didn't have his best game, obviously, against Philadelphia. And here's the thing. The fumbles are unacceptable. I am concerned about that a little bit, maybe even more than you are. But he actually didn't have that bad of a game statistically, other than that, against the Eagles.
he
He
didn't have
still
a
put up
bad game at all. I think
he had
that might
very
have been his best game of the year, the way he was running the football, if you take away the fumbles. That's why it was so frustrating.
well, right. And he still scored a touchdown. We still had, lead, after that fumble that we lost, so, but again, I'm not excusing it. The fumbles are concerning. I still think, I guess the question that I'm asking is the question that a lot of people have asked me, and I'll give my opinion on it, is, oh, do we see more Blake Corum snaps against Saints? My answer to that is I would give him more snaps. I think you have to start getting Blake Corum involved more at some point. I mean, even still, against Philadelphia, after Kyron fumbled twice, the Rams still weren't putting Blake Corum in there. I think at some, and that could have just been, it was a big game against Philadelphia, whatever. But I do think at some point, um, you know, the Rams have to start, I think, doing what people thought they were going to do, which is using Kyron and Blake interchangeably. I refuse to believe that you draft a running back in the third round for insurance. I don't believe that when people say that. I don't think that the Rams would have spent a third round pick on Blake Corum if they literally weren't going to play him for 2 years until Kyron's contract was up. I just don't believe that. That's not a smart drafting strategy. It's not very fair to anybody. So I do think they are planning on getting him involved. If they don't start to get him involved, then we can have that conversation. But I would like to see more Blake Corum snaps against New Orleans. I don't know if it will happen, but Jake, do you have any thoughts on that? Because that's been a very big conversation, within the fan base, and I would be remiss if I glossed over it and didn't bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, he had one fumble going into week 9. And I know he's had quite a few as of late, but I just don't think this is much of a discussion. As much as it sucks, Kyron Williams, if he finishes with 4 fumbles on the year, whatever he's at, that's fine. That's a fine number. It's a down year for fumbles, sure, but I just think that people, for instance, if the Rams win that game, no one's talking about this, but the Rams lost, and they lost pretty painfully in front of everybody. And so I think, you're looking to blame somebody. You're going to blame the guy that fumbled twice. Now, that second fumble they recovered, so it didn't hurt them. I keep seeing that 2 fumbles killed them. No, only 1 fumble killed them. And And yeah, I mean, he can't fumble in that situation. You're absolutely right. But I just think this whole I need to see Blake Corum, or yeah, I need to see Blake Corum or bench him for Blake Corum. I think you are drastically underestimating how much work a running back truly has to do. And Corum is not ready to take on a full workload. He's not ready to even do half and half with Kyron right now. And the Rams don't trust him on that level, not yet anyway. To your point, he fumbled twice and they didn't even waste time. They kept him right back in there. They put him right back in there. Um, I just kind of I'm at the point where it's like I don't really even care, you know. If Blake Corum were to play, 10, 15 snaps, do you think that changes the result of this game? I don't. I think that's kind of just where I'm at, is that I think there are more pressing needs. He needs to get better with the fumbles. Hopefully he does from here on out. If it, still is an issue and he's fumbling twice a game or whatever, then fine. We have that discussion and maybe we come to the realization that that needs to happen. But I just don't think that, if you're going to sit there and say, well, Corum is better, he has never once proven that he's better. Now, to be fair, he hasn't really gotten many opportunities, but I just think there are so many other things to be focused on with this team, like how the offensive line looked like the best they've looked in years against the Patriots last week. And then they followed it up against the Eagles with almost the same exact offensive line and really just looked completely lost. And, stuff like that, like what's the deal with wide receiver? Why is it just the Cooper Cup and Puka Nacua show? Why aren't they really, diversifying these targets? Why is like Stafford only relying on two guys? Why does the play action passing attack, if you will, have such a small allocation in this offense? Why do they not use slip screens? Why do they not use screens in general? There's a lot of different things that could be looked at, not just the fumbles. But I think pass protection is not something that you could just assume is just, Blake Corum can do it. Well, anybody can pass protect, but can you actually succeed at pass protecting? That's the thing. You can attempt to pass protect. Anybody can step up there in the face of pressure. You just might not get the same result. So, I understand when losses happen, people want to point fingers, people want to change things and whatnot. Making a change just to make a change is just not the way I would run my football team. This week, they have as good a chance as any to get a win. They need to get this win. If they don't, they're going to have to win 5 straight, in my opinion. I will probably go as far as to say if they lose this weekend, I'm out on the Rams. Because there'd just be no excuse. Following that Sunday Night Football game, losing the way you did in front of your home fans, you have to go on the road and have some sort of payback and show, some fight. If they came out and they didn't have that, that would tell me that this team is just an inconsistent mess. And unfortunately, the season would be over. But that's my thing. I don't think necessarily that Kyron's fumbles are the biggest issue right now. They are an issue, and it is somewhat big. But if he stops, I think we can all live with that. If it continues and it gets worse and worse, then fine, we'll have that discussion if that happens.
I agree. I'm on the same page. I wanted to let you have the opportunity to speak on it first because everybody knows that, I'm a big Kyron fan. So if I were to come out and say all of that and everything, people would be like, hold on, is that real? But I agree. I think it's concerning. I don't want anybody to think. I mean, if you look at my live tweets from that game, I definitely was very critical of the fumbles. But at the same time, I think that people have the memory of a goldfish sometimes. It's about perspective. It's about looking at what he brings to the offense and basically being the guy on offense in the absence of Cup and Nakua. He's a very, very talented running back. He does have a problem at the moment with fumbling. I hope that, he works on it, and I think that he will make up for it, hopefully against New Orleans, Jake. With that, let's get into our score predictions. You and I are on the same page. If the Rams do not win against New Orleans, we're out on them. It's kind of inexcusable at this point. You are where you are in the season now, you have obviously the NFC West that's wide open, but really the Rams have kind of put themselves in a spot where they cannot rely on anybody. You have to get out there, you have to win. You have to win these games that you should win against New Orleans if you want to have any hope at all for the playoffs. And if everybody is saying, "Oh, the Rams need a tank," it's too late. It's too late for the Rams to tank. I'm pretty convinced, just based on where the standings are, where everybody's at. I guess theoretically the Rams could lose every. It's not even worth having the discussion. But if people, what people are saying, oh, the Rams need a tank for a top pick, you would also need a lot of the other teams to do what you need them to do. It's just like we have too many wins. Let's go for it. Let's go for the playoff spot. Like perspective, guys. Come on. But Jake, with that, what are you predicting this weekend? Assuming
I
a win.
got Yeah, I got to win. I mean, I've already said it, but in case you guys haven't heard it, I think the Rams are going to win this game. They're going to lose to the Bills, and they're going to win out. That's how I see it. I kind of have seen that for a bit. I felt like that Bills game, I've been very consistent with that Bills game being a loss. The only difference is now, after fighting off the Bills on a short week, you have the 49ers, who aren't as dangerous as, say, I thought that they would be at this point in the season. So that's the difference. Is I had them losing two straight there, but I have changed it to a win. That means the Rams would sweep the 49ers on the year. But no, they're going to win this game. They're going to step up. It's going to be close because the Rams can't blow anyone out to save their life. I don't know why. They just can't. So I'm going to say 27-20 here. I think it's going to be a wicked close game, but I think the Rams pull away at the end.
Well, I have 24-20. So Rams. So we are, very, I think, much on the same page about that. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams win by more than that, though. But I just think based off what we've seen from them, they kind of like make it anxiety inducing the entire game. Like they can't seem to get the blowout or get the super comfortable lead, or anything like that. So I think 24-20. I think we're going to see, well, we'll get into predictions, but I think that the Rams are going to look solid after that Sunday Night Football debacle. I think they're going to be on a mission. Jake, on that note, your three bold predictions for this game against the Saints.
So I'll start off by saying this. This is pretty much locking in every week. Puka Nacua over 100 yards receiving. I think it's a no-brainer. I think he's just going to continue to do that the rest of the year. I think this is a good opportunity for him. I know Cooper Kupp should have a good game as well, but I'm going to say Puka Nacua goes for 100 and he catches 2 touchdowns in this one. The second one, it's weird because Jared Verse had that huge highlight reel play where he just totally knocked Jordan Mailata on his ass. At the same time, he only had one pressure that entire game. So I feel like he has a rookie of the year, resume to pad, especially with one of his teammates in Braden Fisk being on his tail. So I'm going to say Jared Verse gets 5 pressures on Derek Carr and gets 2 sacks in this one. So yeah, I think he'll follow that up nicely. And then number 3 here, I'm going to say Kyron Williams does not fumble in this game. He goes for 120 rushing yards. And yeah, that's what I'm going to say. 120 rushing yards, no fumble. Rams win.
So my first prediction was Kyron Williams 100 yards on the ground. Because he honestly, I thought even still in the Eagles game, he was going to get it. Like we both talked about, he actually had a very good game on the ground, aside from the fumbles. And, obviously towards the end of the game plan had to change a little bit because the Rams were playing catch up, trying to win. And, so he wasn't able to get 100 yards, but I think he's going to get 100 yards against the Saints. My next prediction, I was going to do a Puka one, but let me do something different. Let's say You know what? I think Cooper Cup is going to go over 100 yards and a touchdown. I felt like Cooper Cup still had a good game against the Eagles, but obviously it was kind of like Puka's game. Cup was quiet for Cup, which is, still, standards are very high. But I think that Cooper Cup's going to have a big game. I think he's going to go for over 100 yards. I think he's going to have a touchdown. Then my last prediction will make it defense. Man, I really feel good about Jared Verse going to this game too. You know what? Let's do something crazy. I'm going to say a defensive lineman is going to get an interception. Because I was thinking about it and I was like, earlier today actually, I was like, how fun would it be to see like Braden Fisk or Kobe Turner like get an interception? I know what everyone's thinking. How does that happen? But it can happen. A deflection, getting hit as, he throws the ball so many, like, I don't know. I just think that we're going to see an unusual, weird play where Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, maybe Bobby Brown, somebody is going to get a pick off of Derek Carr because this defense has been really riding for us. They've been playing really hard, and that's like one of the last things I want to see them do. So, yeah. That one might have been a little crazy. That one was not a safe prediction, but we're going to keep it in there because you had your block punt and it happened.
Yeah.
So I could have my Kobe Turner interception.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I could see it.
But yeah, guys, Jake and I are both predicting a Rams win tomorrow against the Saints. In closing, Saints are a banged up team, but you can't discredit them and you can't sleep on them. They've got Derek Carr, they've got Alvin Kamara, they've got, a pretty solid defense. And, the Rams have to play their game and they have to get out there and they have to play well. If they don't win, Jake and I are going to have a very, very different tone, I think, going for the rest of the season on this show, and what that means. We're just at that point in the season where, this can't happen. So I don't think we're going to have to do that though, Jake. I mean, honest, I don't think we're going to have to bring that vibe to the function. I think we're going to be able to be positive when we reconvene on Monday night, guys. But that's going to do it for us. As always, please like and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at Downtown Rams. You can follow Jake on Twitter/X at JKBogan. You can follow me at the Alexis Craft. And guys, we'll be back Monday night to recap our game against the Saints. But until then, as always, stay safe, take care, and go Rams.
And I did just notice this, by the way. So shout out Man of Paradox.
Thank you.
I was gonna hit end stream and I saw this and I want to make sure we didn't miss it. Hey, I'm taking Rams over New Orleans. I'm taking Rams over Bills. And crazy prognostication I had prior to you going live. Rams beat Lions in playoffs. Honestly, just sign me up for that. That last part, I can live with that. Even if they don't get to the Super Bowl, I can live with that. The way this season's gone, if you could, yes, sign me up for that and that only. Not that I would turn down a Super Bowl, but But yeah, appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys soon.